Welcome to the Programmatic Digest, a podcast dedicated to reviewing industry trends and latest news in the programmatic and ad tech world. I'm Ellen Parker, your host and Chief Programmatic Sensei of Ellen Parker Consulting, where we offer one-on-one coaching or a 6-month training and development program in programmatic media to fit you and your team's needs. So thank you for joining us. Remember to subscribe right below and enjoy the show. All right, welcome everybody to the Programmatic Digest podcast. I am your host, Ellen Parker, and today we have a special guest, Kevin Bauer. How are you, Kevin?
I'm doing great, thank you. How are you?
I am fantastic. If you're not watching this video on YouTube, I strongly recommend because Kevin has one of the most amazing real background. Okay, it is not fake. It's not fake. He's put a lot of effort into it. But yeah, he has a really cool background. I'm not going to tell you what it is on audio so that you go check it out because it's really cool. But Kevin, before we talk about data strategy, identity, how to create sanity for marketers in this Cookiepocalypse, I really want to learn more about you. I think we introduce ourselves best in our own words. So tell us about you. Tell us how you got to where you are. Talk about your journey and what you're currently doing for Prohaska Consulting.
Yeah, cool. No, thank you for asking. Yeah, so I've been around for a long time. You know, it's a long story, but I'll try to keep it brief. So I've been in the space for several decades now. I think I got into the digital space around 2000. Over in Europe, I was working for a company that got bought by Yahoo, and that's kind of how I landed in the digital industry and ran the automotive division for them across a bunch of different countries in Europe. Yeah, it was a really fun job and fun living in the UK. I lived there for 13 years, so almost half of my adult life. So I still say weird British things like pram from time to time.
What's pram?
A pram is a baby carriage.
Oh, okay.
Or a stroller.
A stroller.
See, I don't have kids, in case.
Okay.
Yeah, it'd be a stroller. But anyways, did that and then came back to the States back in 2007, and I've spent a lot of time on both the client side as an operator of digital marketing and e-commerce, doing a lot of the media buying and optimization, and spent a lot of time in the consulting side of the world as well, just helping people learn from the mistakes that I made as an operator. For example, setting up CDPs with no strategy. I may have done that in the past, but learned a lot from it. Yeah. And then moved into the consulting world. And over the last couple of years, as you know, because I've listened to many of your podcasts, which are fantastic. Everybody's talking roughly around the same thing, right? What do I do with data? What do I do with identity? And I'm really helping people answer those questions. And that's also what Prohaska is doing.
I love that because that's kind of what we do, but not only focus on data, right? So Ellen Parker Consulting, we offer programmatic media solutions. And so what that means is basically it's a mix of media activation support, which is running your campaigns. Yeah, I have buyer strategists on staff, and then training and workshops, which is really what my heart is so happy about, training and workshop and finding new things, right? Chris Doe said, if you want to learn something, teach it. And so that's why I'm always like, you know what? I don't know about this. So I'm glad that you're coming on the podcast because there's been a lot of new updates in the last 3 to 4 months. There's been quite a few updates in the whole data world. And it feels like it's been a long time coming and it's still a long way to go. So from your perspective, what should we know about data? What should we focus on right now? And I'm also not only speaking to our decision makers, I'm also speaking to a strategist that's running multi omni-channel campaigns where there's a lot of first, second, third party data involved. Like, what should we tell both of them?
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And it's, so many people are struggling with that today. Almost everybody that I talk to is just really overwhelmed in this space. There's so much change happening. How do you stay on top of it? In fact, I was looking at a timeline graph the other day of the major changes that have happened in this space over the last 4 years. And not only are there like so many you can't fit it on a slide, but the number per year are actually increasing. It goes from like 3 major changes in 17 to 4 and 18 to, it's accelerating. So what we're seeing is a lot of people that are just a little bit like deer in the headlights, just a little overwhelmed, and not knowing which direction to go. What I'm advising and what Prohaska is really advising people is just stay calm. There's a lot going on, but really at the end of the day, there's a lot of common.
Everybody chill.
Yeah, stay right. Well, speaking of my British time, it's a British thing, right? Stay calm and carry on, kind of thing. Yeah, exactly. But what we're finding is brands can really benefit from slowing down just a little bit and taking a look at what is the data that I actually need to collect? What is the data that I'm going to be using? And so there's kind of 4 different key areas that we look at there. I see brands that are collecting entirely too much data. They've heard the Cookiepocalypse, and they're like, first party data is everything. I better get as much as I possibly can.
Is there such thing as collecting too much data though? What does that mean? So give me an example of when a client has collected too much data and what type of data was too much?
So it's a great question. So if you are not using the data, and I mean like actionably using the data to do something, to send a more personalized email message, or to understand an audience, or to build an algorithm for some type of recommendation, or whatever the case may be, then honestly, the data is too much data. And the reason why that's a problem is because it really grows the risk within a business of holding too much data.
Yeah.
And so as a marketer, as a data person, I'm actually going to end up running into challenges with the finance team, with legal and compliance team, who are going to be saying, hold on a second, our risk of having a problem if somebody wants this data deleted, is going up the more and more you collect. So I want to make sure that you're using what you're collecting.
Got it. Okay. It's almost like what I like to illustrate this with, when somebody is constantly learning, reading new things, reading books, learning a new skills, taking this certification, and not implementing it. Yes. It's almost like you're collecting that data, that knowledge, and the knowledge is just collecting dust at this point. And I also say that, and I think it's a perfect example and a segue into the next question, which is, knowledge isn't power unless applied. So how are you going to collect all this data and look at it in your benefit, whether it's measuring it, whether it's, like you said, providing a more personalized experience for the consumer, on behalf of your brand or on behalf of your client partners. So that gets into the next question about identity, right? With so many, and maybe you've kind of answer this question, but let me ask this instead. So with so many identity solutions out there, there's a lot of confusion over IDs. So what should we be thinking about? Like, what is the first few steps we need to go through when we want to look at a solution, like a partner, like an ID solution partner? Where should we start?
Yeah, it's a great point, because data without identity is a bit like, for those who are old enough to remember, Christmas Vacation, when Griswold comes out and he's got the big ball of Christmas lights, and they're all just this big pile of lights and you can't do anything with it. Okay. If you don't have if you don't have identity, that's what your data is doing for you. And so it's all grounded in the identity. What we're seeing is, and what I'm seeing a lot of is the pace of innovation here is really fast, of course, and everybody has a new ID, and they're going to just continue to explode, whether it's UID or media ID, or they're all over the place. What we're really saying is to start with, have your own identity solution. Have your own identity. Let me say that differently. Your own identity resolution first. The reality of the market is there's going to be new IDs coming out all the time, and you're going to have to work with multiple IDs. Whether you're on the buy side or the sell side, you're going to be dealing with partners that use some other type of identity platform, some other type of identity taxonomy. And so really the only way that you can maintain control of your business and really understand where you need to go is to have your own identity, and then make sure that that identity is interoperable with all of the other identities, whether that's through a clean room or what have you. And where that really starts is having a solid data taxonomy. And so what I mean by that is thinking through the data sets that you have and asking, how do I actually want to ladder all of this data up to my ultimate identity? For some brands, it is a household. For some brands, it's an individual consumer, Kevin and Richard Bauer. For some, it is based on an account. I could have multiple credit accounts within a given brand. And so it depends on each individual business, but really think through what is that taxonomy that I want to go through to identify my identity so that I can interoperate with whatever identity solution comes down the pipeline tomorrow.
Okay, so let's break it down. Let's break it down a little bit because I think you threw a lot of like good gems. So I need to, for my own brain and for the listener, I need to understand a few things. Okay, so if we had to recap this conversation right now, let's say if somebody was crazy enough to stop in the podcast, what would be 3 things they want to remember about how to select ID? What is it? What are we calling it? Identity solution.
Identity solution.
Right. There's so many names around because I understand what taxonomy is, but maybe for somebody that may not have a healthy first party data strategy or even like a healthy partnership with a data provider for their own clients or their own brand, how can they really start? Because I find it with some of the clients that I've worked with that the larger brands that I've worked with have somewhat, not all, but the one I've worked with have somewhat a little bit more leverage when it comes to their first party data, whether it's CRM, client space, or website traffic. They're able to actually manage that. But for the lower end brands that may not have,
call them the smaller,
right, a little bit smaller, what can we tell them? Because I think that is going to be very valuable to them as well.
Yeah, I think being able to understand and be comfortable that there is a what's the word, strati of identity. You're going to always be dealing with a multitude of identities from the unknown consumer. Like when you're trying to acquire customers for the first time, you don't know anything about them necessarily, so they're unknown. And then you move into the known. You move into the known who are authenticated with you, who have logged in. Sorry about that. So you're dealing with a multitude of identities. And what that means is you're going to need to deal with a mix of both deterministic identity, which is when I can say for sure 100% it's Kevin Richard Bauer. But I'm also going to need to deal with probabilistic. And there's nothing wrong with probabilistic identity. It matches the various parts of my marketing strategy, right? As I move from acquired through to retention and loyalty, I'm going to deal in all of those different identity sets. And so we just want to map our media spend and our strategy to the different stages of identity. And that gives us the maximum opportunity.
Yeah. So, okay, good point. So if you had to remember one thing about what Kevin just shared is that we can no longer put all of our eggs in one basket. You're going to have to partner with multiple vendors, partner with 2 or 3 or 4 companies to help you understand the best strategy for your current campaign strategy or whatever.
Yes.
So I think that's really important to highlight because also it's a good lead into our attribution conversation because attribution and measurement conversation, I would say, because if we had to talk about attribution models, right? Honestly, I don't know if most of us understand what that is, like how we define it or how it works. So define attribution modeling or why attribution is so important to our industry to, let's say, my 10-year-old niece. Like, what would you tell her about attribution modeling?
So attribution modeling is really interesting that you said that on the 10-year-old niece. That's a good one. So attribution is really about understanding what is the source of value that you are trying to create in your business.
Okay.
And you really want to tie all of your expenses to whatever that source of value is, right? Because you're spending money to try to make money off of a certain piece of value. A consumer is obviously the most common one, or for B2B, a client is your source of value. They're what do that. So for a 10-year-old, their parents are probably the source of value, right? Right. If I want a new toy, it's really, I got to convince mom. It's how much time do I invest in mom, as opposed to how much time do I invest in a given catalog or a commercial or what have you. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so really understand what are you actually pegging your spend to? I'm going to spend $1. What am I trying to generate? And what you're not actually, ironically, trying to generate is $1. You're trying to generate a consumer first and foremost, and they will generate the dollars for you.
Wait, you lost me in the last 2 minutes. So you're saying, say that again one more time for the listener, not for me.
So
for me.
You want to ground your spend in the source of value for your business, and that is typically a consumer,
okay,
right, or a client if you're in the B2B space. What brands tend to do today is they tend to measure their spend against channels. They'll measure spend against paid search, display,
what's your ROAS?
Et cetera. Yeah. Right, and ROAS, right. But it's not paid search that creates value for your business. It's consumers that create value for your business.
Okay.
So really what you want to be asking is how much money am I spending to acquire a new customer? And how much money am I spending to retain the right type of customer?
Okay.
Both of those are the right questions to ask. The spend on display versus search, et cetera, is really not as meaningful a question.
So how do you, I'm trying to give another illustration for listeners there. So where should they start? Like, what should marketers be thinking about when it comes to attribution modeling? Because we talked about identity, we talked about how, where, when to partner. We talked about partnering multiple times, or partnering, like, assessing different partners for what we're trying to accomplish. Do you think it's still relevant to do the same thing for an attribution? I'm not going to call it measurement, but an attribution, would it be a model? Thank you. An attribution model. And so, like, how, because I'm still a little bit unclear about that particular thing. And Zeus is unclear as well. I don't know if you heard him, but he said he just walked outside the He's like, open the door. This is my office too.
We talked earlier about the importance of identity, that everything is grounded in identity.
Yeah.
Right. And so if your measurement's going to be grounded on identity, then your attribution should be grounded in identity. It shouldn't be grounded in channels, paid search versus display. It should be grounded in identity. How much money am I spending to acquire or retain an individual consumer? A better way to think of that nowadays is more the market is shifting away from, certainly last click, of course, but even multi-touch attribution is essentially dead these days. And what's really coming to the fore is media mix modeling, where I'm understanding where I'm spending my money relative to where my consumers actually are, and then connecting those two dots. How much money am I spending against how many customers are seeing my advertising is a much more worthy measurement of spend and attribution of spend.
Let me guess, the way we do that is by measuring it, right?
Well, the measuring thing is the second thing. So you hear a lot of people talking about attribution and measurement as if they're the same thing. And in reality, what we're finding is that they're very different things. The first thing to do is to understand where I'm going to attribute whatever spend, revenue, whatever it is that I'm trying to attribute. Again, we would encourage at the identity level. Once I'm there, though, then it becomes, okay, how am I going to measure what that spend was, or measure what that revenue, et cetera, was? How do I know if it's working? And there, what we're seeing is, I know you've had Dr. Pao on here before as an example. One of our a good friend of Prohaska's, talking about making sure that we're measuring how much of our advertising is getting in front of real people, and not only real people, but of course the right real people. It's too easy to get distracted by ROAS numbers and impression levels, but are real people actually seeing it?
I'm Ellen Parker. What if I tell you for $75 a month, you get to join a community with other fellow programmatic ninjas, successful ones that are looking to grow, ones that are looking to share what they know and learn from others? Would you be interested? And I get to coach you through your transformation, coach you through the skill set that you need to know in order to get where you want to get. Either is that raise, either is that promotion, either is even like a different job, right? So I'm not a recruiter, y'all. I'm not a recruiter. I'm one of you. I've done what you've been doing for at least 10 years, and I'm here to help you. And in the midst of things, some of my friends from the Programmatic Digest podcast, some of those guest hosts get to come. How many times have you listened to any other podcast and say, dang, I wish they could elaborate on this, or I could ask this. Well, you get a chance to do that in the community. Just for $75 a month, we meet weekly, we grow weekly, we learn weekly, we share authentically, just being ourselves. You know what I mean? Like, try the first call on me, DM me, send me information, head over to the programmaticmeetup.com. I know you'll be able to find it anyway. So see you next Friday. Like, oh my gosh. This is going to be a tangent again, but I have a community. It's called the Programmatic Meetup. I was telling you about it.
Yeah.
And last Friday, or a few Fridays ago, since this is going to go live in a couple of Fridays, we went through a training session. So once in a while, we do live training session, and so we pull data reports, right? We remove the advertiser name and campaign. So the only thing we see is literally just the data. And I walk them through best practices when it comes to optimizing for site lists. And bear with me because it's related to what you just said. And so I'm going through my site list and I'm seeing all these sites. And so I'm like, what's going on? These sites don't look legit. And sure enough, we randomly started looking at site. And so I'm optimizing off of those site lists. I'm excluding it. And then I'm like, well, who is sending me those sites? So I pivot in the supply vendors. And then I see who's sending me the site, and the main, I'll keep the supply vendor off because they're friends of the podcast, but the main supply vendor that were sending some of this data was a very popular supply vendor. And so I'm like, okay, so who is the supply vendor working with? And so I'm taking a step even further out and I'm pulling in the sellers. And so for my friends listening or my friends watching, what I'm doing is just optimizing my inventory. It's very common when it comes to SPO. And I want to give a shout out to Manuela Cortes because she's in the community, and she's the one who was walking us through SPO and how to implement it. And as I was just driving. And so I realized that those same websites are accessible via multiple supply vendors, via multiple sellers. So it's basically all over the place. Everybody's selling almost the same thing, right? And so it is super, super important that you do have a legit way to measure everything. And I want to give my shout outs to all of the display strategists, the media buyers, the programmatic traders that are actually doing this on a day-to-day and taking the time to really look at the inventory. But this is just an example of, you will have to have the technology set up. You'll have to have the human power set up, but you cannot trust. I should say you can trust, but always verify.
Always verify. That's right.
We can trust, but you have to verify. And I think that's what you're saying, Kevin. Like, you have to have certain level of implementation, whether it's like the technology, the people, your strategy, and it goes back to identity, it goes back to within your data strategy, all of that. It's not going to mean anything unless you have the systems and tools in place to help you just empower your strategy.
So even if, to extend your example, even if we're just going to make up a number, I through SPO, I optimize my spend from $100,000 down to $50,000, just picking numbers, right? Well, is that $50,000 against one person? Is it against a million people? And are they the right people? Are they the people that are interested in my business? And so that really ties back to ask yourself the basic questions. What is the data that I actually need to be able to action marketing? How do I understand who I'm actually spending it with or targeting? And then how do I measure it? Imagine a conversation with your CFO, and it could go one of two ways. They could say, hey, how much money are you spending on paid search and why? Or they could, and you'd say, I'm spending $1 million on paid search and I'm not sure what I'm getting out of it. Or you could say, hey, I spent $1 million and I acquired 1 million unique new customers that are great for our business. Which one of those conversations is going to go better?
I know which one is, but I'll let you tell us, Kevin. What do you think?
It'll be the latter, trust me.
Yeah.
About growth, right? Growth is about customers, not about how many impressions I delivered out there in the world.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not about that CPM number. It's not about that CPC, but those metrics can become very important. And it goes back to looking at every single details, right? Like those metrics are just a way to indicate how we should move that needle, or if we should move that needle to be relevant enough for the consumer, which is the customer.
Yeah, and that's well said, because I think the trap that a lot of us have gotten into over the years, to your point, is we've thought that the CPC was the ultimate number, as an example. I got to lower my CPC. Well, not necessarily, right? It's an indicator. It's not the goal. So it's well said.
And and another thing too, like as my brain is spinning here, spinning and spinning. I think one of the things that's also underrated is the fact that when data is done correctly, right? And you said it's 4 things. When data is identity, it's attribution, it's measurement. When those 3 things are done well, then you're more likely to even serve on human-based sites, which what I mean by that is non-fraudulent sites. Sites that are less likely to have some bots in activities, or some invalid activities, which is the proper term, invalid activities. And so that is why, it does affect the rest of your strategy, and it will affect the rest of your operations, because now you really identify and you took out all those bad apples, which you could probably never take 100% of them out. But by implementing the right partners, by making sure that you have the right tools and system to look over this on a daily basis or weekly basis, whatever, it's going to set you out. And
it's not just fraud. Think about it in terms of transactions versus customers. Too many of us over time have optimized to transactions, only to find that we can't explain why our customer file isn't growing year over year. Well, it's because we acquired a ton of transactions of customers who were only ever going to buy from us once. That wasn't the right thing to optimize to.
Yeah, exactly. So, all right. So you drop a lot of great points here. And before we go into the closing segment, I do want to ask for those 3 things, right? So if anybody had to stop the podcast right now, I am a big believer that I just said it earlier, but I'm a big believer that there's no point of hearing all this information. We're not going to activate on it. We're not activate. Can you tell I'm a strategist and buyer? If you're not going to implement and execute on it. So what are 3 or 4 things that Kevin wants every single people listening or viewing this YouTube video? What are 3 or 4 things you want them to do? You want us to do to implement this knowledge you just poured, like this, all of these strategy gems, like it's literally like $1 million tips that you just gave, right? So can you recap them in 3 to 4 bullet points to let them get it done right now?
What's the tweet version, right?
That's a good point.
Right. The tweet version is pick 2 or 3 data points that are really important and will move the needle for you.
Okay.
Make sure those data points, you can attribute those to individual consumers or clients, not channels or cookies.
Got it.
And then make sure you're measuring whether the real people you're looking for are actually seeing your dollars well spent or not.
Gotcha. And those data points that you're referring to
they are unique things that you don't find from consumers just browsing your website. You want context. You want their challenges. You want their actual needs, not just what they're transacting on.
Okay, that sounds great. I mean, this is a great way to end the podcast. But before we do end, I want to move into the closing segment where I ask a lot of fun questions.
I don't like to have fun.
I usually ask this question at the beginning of the podcast, but I got so excited by the conversation, I skipped it. So I'm gonna ask it now. Okay. So going back to my niece Linda, she is super smart. She is like a mini activist, but mini Christian activist, I'm gonna say.
Yeah.
So how would you define programmatic advertising to her?
Programmatic advertising is simply the automation of spending money.
That is well said. I could have said it. Knowing her, I feel like she'll have a lot of follow-up questions. But
so how do I apply this to my toy collection exactly?
My dragon collection. She loves dragons. So all right. Okay. So Kevin, I know you might say this as a fun fact, but like, can you tell us a couple fun facts about yourself? Even though I didn't want to say it.
Other than the one obviously staring at you behind, for anybody who actually tunes in. Spoiler alert again, tune in. I'll give you a couple of others. Let's see. I am a state dance champion.
No.
I was a dance. Huh? What kind of dance? Well, I don't want to give too much away, but I'm a state dance champion. And I used to be the cheerleader for major university. You can probably imagine if you stalked me, what that would be. And I live I think as I mentioned earlier, I live most of my adult life in Europe. So
yeah, that's really good. That's really dope. I won't YouTube it unless you want me to YouTube your dance championship.
It's hard to find. I've challenged people. The video is out there. Nobody has ever come back and said they found it, but it is out there.
So is it out there? Oh, is it not? Okay. Challenge accepted.
That's right.
Great. So I'm a big reader. I love books. So what is the latest book you've read, or like what's your latest read or Audible?
You know, so I've been doing a lot of podcasts lately. I love your podcast. I love the ANA podcast, the IAB podcast. I'm just kind of becoming absorbed in those. I have found that reading, I've moved from the physical medium into the digital medium on that one. So, but the last great book I read was Good to Great.
Good to Great,
which is one of my favorites of all time.
Jim Collins.
Yeah.
I literally just interviewed Josh Perlstein from Response Media.
Yeah.
And he literally just said he was rereading the book just a couple hours. So I batch record in a day. Literally just a couple hours was my first time. Yeah, it is. So I'm going to download it and then I'm going to order the book because I like the physical book. But once in a while, I'll start listening to it until it gets here. So yeah, I think it's just like a sign. I'm going to do it.
The life changer.
Jim Collins. Okay. So lastly, if you had to give yourself an advice, like your freshman self starting, let's say years ago, what is something you wish you knew then that you know now?
The world is not static. In other words, I spent so much of my career, and I think we do this as marketers too, when we're evaluating our spend, et cetera, is we think that tomorrow is going to look exactly like today.
Yeah.
And it's not. Whether you're upset with your boss, I don't like my boss, I don't like my job, I don't, whatever it is, tomorrow is going to be different than today. And that brings patience, that brings the ability to kind of think strategically and look a little bit farther afield, if you will, rather than always be in the moment and always panicked about what's right in front of my face. That's what it was. That's
dope. That's dope. Well, thank you so much for sharing. This was great. We got so much gems out of this podcast, and I think we're gonna have to have you back to finish some of the conversation. But in the meantime, where can people find you if they need you?
They can find me at prohaskaconsulting.com or of course on LinkedIn.
Okay, great. Well, your information will be in the description and everywhere on social media. Thank you so much for dropping by. This was amazing. Really appreciate you. If nobody told you, thank you for being you today, and talk to you very, very soon.
All right. Thank you so much.